This is the SF Productions Podcast Network.
Emergency, the Law and Order of the 1970s.
From the Pop Culture Bunker, I'm Mindy.
And I'm Mark. You can check out our audio podcast, How I Got My Wife to Read Comics, on iTunes or on our website, sfpodcastnetwork.com. We've been watching this station called MeTV a lot lately. You might be able to find it on your local digital channels, which means if you have cable or satellite, you may have to look way up in the system for like channel 958, because they really bury them.
What does ME stand for again?
Memorable Entertainment Television. Right. Mm-hmm. And if you have the old rabbit ears like we do, you see that every time you're going through channels. It's like, ours is like on channel 4.2.
Right. It's sort of the substation of our local NBC affiliate.
Right. And MeTV is kind of like TV Land originally was.
Used to be, yes.
Before they became the home of old sitcom stars doing essentially 90s sitcoms.
Right.
All over again.
So some of the shows that we watch are like Petticoat Junction, and sometimes we watch I Dream of Jeannie in the morning. Right.
So we've been watching Emergency, which was on from 1972 to 1979. And this was part of the Jack Webb empire, including Dragnet and Adam 12. These were realistic shows, not reality shows so much, but the idea being, here's real situations dramatized. Dramatized? Is that the right term? Dramatizations of real world situations for people in essentially public service.
Right. Right. So, Emergency, which I watched as a teenager with my mother, who also really liked the show, was about emergency responders. It was about paramedics and firefighters, and then the doctors that work with them. And it was really interesting because this was when paramedics were first starting, and they were able to communicate with the hospital via a portable telephone. Ooh. And they had a portable EKG, and they could shock people with the paddles. Right. And this was something that was so new, it had never been done outside of a hospital before.
Right, and there was a lot of controversy about it because people were like, well, but they're not doctors. Why do you have them doing this?
Yes.
But clearly today, everybody accepts that it makes a lot more sense because you can get the actual help and treatment to somebody far faster than it's going to take to just throw them in an ambulance and get them to a hospital.
Right.
So Randolph Mantooth and Kevin Tighe played the EMS guys.
Right.
And Robert Fuller and Bobby Troop played the doctors back at the hospital. And Julie London was their nurse, Dixie McCall.
Yes.
And by the way, the older doctor, Bobby Troop, was married to Julie London.
Yes.
And Julie London was earlier married to Jack Webb, who was the producer of the show. So that's kind of how she got the gig.
Right. Now, most of the episodes would have sort of a pattern to them. Right. There was a first injury or an accident that they sort of followed through the entire episode. You might find out what happened to that patient at the end of the episode. And then there was usually some sort of a wacky injury. A kid gets his head stuck in something. Right. Or
the local drunk comes in.
Yeah.
Back when you could do the wacky drunk humor.
Right.
And you knew it was wacky injury time because they really played it up with the music. Like, wop, 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 wop. You know, yes. I mean, they telegraphed it pretty well.
Yes. And then there was usually some sort of a big injury or accident that it was really dangerous and it was hard to get the person out, and they had to use, you know, what effectively were the jaws of life or some sort of a contraption that put the EMS guys in danger.
Or they go into a burning house, that type of thing.
Right.
And so, as we were watching this, Mindy realized this show is the Law and Order of the 1970s.
If you watch Law and Order, and especially from the very beginning, the earliest episodes of Law and Order had a lot of people in it that you would now recognize as stars, who weren't stars back then. This would be their first role. In later episodes, you have pretty much predictable villains because it's the person that you recognize. They have bigger stars appearing in Law and Order.
Yeah.
And you know who the guy is that did it because it's the guy you recognize. But the early episodes, it's really interesting because you see a lot of people in it that you recognize now as bigger stars. So if you watch Emergency, it's pretty much the same thing.
Right. We saw, just in a recent episode we were watching, saw John Travolta in his first role, in terms of, apparently according to IMDb, as injured hiker.
He had maybe 1.5 lines.
Right. Also, there was Eric Estrada as man with eye injury, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as man stuck in car, Mark Harmon as Officer Dave Gordon, and Nick Nolte as Fred.
Yeah, and then you also, in the episodes, recognize a lot of those actors who were in everything in the 70s and in the 60s. Those TV actors who just had bit parts everywhere, and you always say, I know that person, who is that? But
Joanne Worley or Adam West,
and
you know.
that's the equivalent now of seeing a now famous person on the Law and Order. Although we don't recognize them now because, you know, that was 30 years ago.
Right. And the other similarity is, just like in Law and Order, you have a handoff from one team, the EMS, to another team, the doctors. Just like on Law and Order, you see the cops handing it off to the lawyers.
Right. But I have to say that this TV show is much slower altogether than even a Law and Order.
Yeah, and I think there's a true demarcation point which shows sped up, and that was when MTV came on the air. And you can look at even commercials just prior to MTV and then after MTV, they're much faster. And so this is a show from the 70s, long before MTV, and they take their time on this show.
I mean, really, literally, they take their time. There'll be a 2 or 3 minute thing of them driving slowly to an accident scene. Oh my gosh, you just want to hit fast forward. But in any case, you can watch it yourself.
Right.
I'm sure that they're available online. And you can check out our audio podcast, How I Got My Wife to Read Comics, on iTunes, or on our website, sfpodcastnetwork.com. From the Pop Culture Bunker, I'm Mindy.
And I'm Mark. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye-bye.